Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato. Recently I had the honor of sitting down with a true legend in rock music. If you've ever heard the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, The Who, Eagles, or Eric Clapton, then you've heard his work. Glyn Johns is one of the most important engineers and producers in music history. He didn't just capture performances, he helped shape the very sound of rock. His recording techniques set a new standard, and the albums he worked on are still considered benchmarks today. Before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Here's my interview. Glyn, welcome.
Well, welcome to you.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's okay.
You've worked on so many important records. I've wanted to interview you for forever, working with the Beatles, Let It Be sessions or the Get Back sessions. Did you know them previously?
John and Paul came and sang back up on a Stones session. And so I met them then, but I was just the engineer. They barely acknowledged my existence, which was fine. The call from Paul to proceed with the idea he'd had, it was a complete shock. In fact, I thought it was Mick Jagger taking the piss.
Is that something Mick would do?
Accent. No, actually, I went, oh yeah, what do you want? And he said, no, it's Paul. I went, oh. yeah.
What was it like working on that session? Was it?
It was all right. It was interesting. I was obviously, like the rest of the world, a fan of the Beatles.
Yep.
It was a very unusual project. Paul's idea was to do a live concert and perform new music. And so the film that became the Let It Be film was just a documentary of us, how we were going to prepare for that show. And then the live show was to be filmed, and that would be released as the piece. That didn't come about, as we all know. The rest of the band didn't really get the idea. It was a bit far-fetched. It would have been really interesting. I don't think anyone has made a live album of all new songs, and not in pop music anyway. And so we were stumbling around trying to make something out of what we'd got so far. It was okay. I mean, I was retained as the engineer. There was no producer. George Martin attended on the odd day for a little while and facilitated the equipment when we moved to the Beatles office studio in Savile Row. And it became apparent as the sessions went on that I was required to play a little bit more of a role than just the engineer, which of course I was happy to do. But it was only a few days out of my life, frankly.
Interesting.
I was busy, and I finished that after, it was only a couple of weeks. I think it might have been 3 weeks at the most. And then they called me back in to start Abbey Road, and I started Abbey Road, bits odd sessions. And then I went off to America to do something, and they very sensibly decided to go back to George, and George and Jeff Emmerich finished Abbey Road, and thank God they did, because it ended up much better than when I left it, I can tell you.
Did you watch the Get Back documentary at all or not?
I have watched it, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's too long. I think Peter did a brilliant job, I have to say. The original version of the film was awful and depressing and very misleading, I think.
Okay.
What Peter did was turn it around, and my memory of it wasn't anything as gloomy as everyone else seemed to think. They were all breaking up, and all right. So George Harrison left the band for a couple of days. I mean, there's nothing unusual in that to me. I mean, people have arguments. I remember very clearly sitting when there was a bit of a disagreement happening on the soundstage at Twickenham, and I got everyone, all the crew, and I got them, and we went outside to give them privacy while they had a row, basically. And I remember sitting under a little overhang, and it was raining, with Dennis O'Dell, who was the producer of the documentary. And he turned to me and he said, I've waited all these years to do this, and we've been in here 5 minutes and it's all over. And I went, oh, well, there you go. You win some, you lose some. And of course, within a couple of days, it had all been resolved. I think I really enjoyed myself. They had the overriding thing is a great sense of humour.
Right, really sustain some words. Let it be.
it's all happening a little bit too quickly with them both coming in at the same time.
Yeah. Well, Glyn say first time they come in, he seems to be arranging this. Go on. Go on.
When you're locked together like those four were for the early years of their career, it's like being in a family. It's not. It goes way beyond working or anything else, and that is quite apparent. If you watch the film, it's quite apparent. My favourite scene in the film is something I wish I would have prevented if I'd have had anything to do with it, because it was an intrusion. But there's a scene where Paul and John are sitting across a little cafe table.
Oh yeah.
And they're talking about George having just left.
If we do want I can go along with that because the policy is kept together. See, I'm just assuming he's coming back. Assuming he's coming back. Well, if he isn't, then it's a new problem. I think we're all very old. We're not reading each other. I think we're all saying to them.
And it just showed the warmth of their relationship and their friendship, which is not normally visible to anybody, nor should it be, because it's private. Michael Lindsay Hogg, the director, set that up with a microphone in a flower pot, apparently, which I thought was pretty awful, to be not a cool thing. However, no one seems to care now, and it just shows us no one ever got to see the individual guys like that film showed.
Interacting like that. Yeah.
Or them working together or any other. You saw them being interviewed and being amusing or taking the piss or, being bored or whatever it is. And you read about them in the press and you listened to their music and you were blown away. But you never really, really got to see what put it all together. And that documentary, although it was the tail end of what they did creatively, it gives you a good insight as to how they worked and how they interacted.
There's a really interesting shot where you're sitting in the control room at the console and you can see through the window and you can see the entire band, but they're so close to one another, the way that they're set up.
Well, that's always been I didn't have any choice in that case. It was, first of all, they were rehearsing.
Yes.
So they needed to be in audible contact with each other, like you and I are now.
Yeah.
But I hate separating musicians off in different rooms or whatever. There are odd occasions, if it's a loud rhythm section and you've got an acoustic guitar, you need somebody in a booth, but they still have to have eyesight to what's going on. But my setup in a studio is a straight line, like on stage. And that way they're comfortable. They can wander about with a long enough lead to be able to talk to each other face to face.
Well, it's interesting because you can really see their facial expressions. They could see each other. Paul, Paul would be looking at John. They'd be
but
laughing.
Don't forget, again, they were rehearsing. It was they needed to be able to converse just as much as play because they were working stuff out.
There was one point where they brought boxes of amplifiers in, and they opened them up. It looked like two Fender Twins or something. And I think a Leslie cabinet came, and they opened it up.
The Leslie cabinet was my idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd used it with somebody previously and suggested it to George, so they got one.
It just seemed like, whatever gear that they had, whatever gear showed up was what they used on things.
Yeah, but the thing is, again, it was a documentary film for a start off. It wasn't meant to be an album.
Right.
It started out as just a documentary. And as far as the gear's concerned, I'm sure whatever amps tipped up, I don't remember personally what they were or why. Again, they were rehearsing, so it wasn't critical.
Yeah.
And if George had wanted a different amp, he'd have just asked Mal to get him one and he would have arrived,
You're known for this miking technique, right? The Glyn Johns miking technique, and people talk about this all the time.
Yeah. The refinement of that came on the first Led Zeppelin album, miking John Bonham in my normal way, one over the top, one from the side, both equidistant from the snare drum. And a bass drum mic and a snare drum mic, which I very rarely ever used. And we cut a track. I took one of the 67s to do an overdub with Jimmy Page, acoustic, put the acoustic on, and we said, okay, let's do another track. Put the mic back on the drums, walked back into the room. Bonham had started to play, lifted up the faders, and the microphone had been assigned to one side of the stereo. and the other one was still in the middle where the drums always were. And I went, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what would happen if I took this one and put it over there. So, it was just common sense, really.
Wow.
Like everything, probably you're the same. Anything, it's a mistake. It wasn't some kind of genius. It was just a bloody mistake, and I responded to it.
One of the things about the first Zeppelin record that I love about the drums, other than John's playing, is there's a slight overdrive on them, which really gives them a lot of attack and presence. Was that the console at Olympic? Would they have a Helios console there?
Helios didn't exist when that console was built, but it was designed by the man I stole away from Olympic to form Helios.
Okay.
A guy called Dick Swetnam. Yeah, so it was a predecessor to Helios, but it was the same guy. Yeah.
Now, would you overdrive the console a little bit just to kind of get a little extra gain on it?
Drums,
yeah.
I would tend to be more than normal and the fader back down a bit, yeah.
Because they have a really great presence to them, and I can hear a little bit of just grit on them.
Yeah, I've never really understood. Listen, I'm going to be talking nonsense here. To me, my school of music that I've been involved with, my job has been to capture the skill and the sound that the individual's giving me. Nowadays, that's entirely different. They don't want to hear what anyone's giving you. They want to manufacture something that's new or different, which is fine, okay, good luck. But my whole deal was to try and capture the skill of the musician performing, which was his sound, really. So, in order to do that with the microphones that I chose to use, which were invariably U67s, you can't mic closely with those. They're just fatal. And even with a vocal, you don't want to be further than that. The sound of a drum kit or any instrument builds, they're not designed acoustically for the listener to have their ear up against.
Right,
it,
exactly, exactly.
It's all common sense, really. So the further away you are, the more likely you are to get the true sound of what the guy's delivering. And in the case of John Bonham, not only a brilliant drummer, but he really knew how to tune his kit. Extraordinary sounding kit. And I had him on a riser a lot of the time, which sort of made it even a little bit bigger.
What kind of microphone would you typically use on a bass drum back then?
A D30.
That's a big
one, yeah.
Yeah.
That's easily the best.
Why do you like that particular mic?
Because it sounds good. Simple as that. There's no explanation. It's a really good microphone.
Would you place it in the center of the drum or off to the side slightly?
I'd move it about. I mean, very often, some drummers don't use a front head on their drum.
Yeah.
If they did, you'd have to put a cushion against it or whatever, because it would be too ringy. Invariably, I would mic from the center of the drum, but I'd move the mic about until I got it right. Equally, if there was no front head on it, you might want to deaden the back head a little bit. Just a matter of experimenting, really.
With a drummer like Bonham, would you probably not use a snare mic?
I almost certainly didn't use a snare mic, no.
Okay.
The only reason I would use a snare mic is if someone's playing brushes, perhaps, or it would depend on the material, or if I wanted to send echo from a close mic on the drums rather than one of the overheads or both the overheads.
I always wondered about using things like compression. Would you track with the vocals using compression at all, or would you ride the fader?
There'd almost always be a limiter,
yeah.
But I would always ride a vocal as it went down. I didn't use compression to prevent dynamics. I used it to prevent distortion.
Right.
If I blew it. And anyway, it was part of the sound invariably.
Would you mic bass amps back then? Is that typically the only way you do it, or people use direct
No, I'd have
recordings?
both. I'd always mic the
Okay.
bass amp, and that would be a D12, invariably.
In the mixing part of a record, let's say Zeppelin 1, these records happened incredibly quickly, right?
9 days, the whole thing.
So what would the mixing be like? Put some plate on the vocals, or?
It'd be very simple.
Yeah.
My whole principle would be, while the track was being laid down, I would try and give the guys in their earphones pretty much with the way it was going to be. So if there was echo to be added, I'd usually add it there on the date, on the drums, or not necessarily guitars, but it would depend. But I try and give them so they get a buzz, basically.
Sure.
What's going on. The mixing process would be very straightforward. And don't forget, we were talking about 8 tracks.
Right.
You know, or a 4-track before that.
And would you use a limiter on the 2-bus?
No.
Okay.
Very little limiting. Very little.
Compression, anything like that?
Not unless it was really essential. I might use it to get a guitar sound.
What's the difference between miking John Bonham and Keith Moon? When you have an incredibly big drum kit.
The biggest problem, the difference would be that you'd have to be wary of whether your microphones would survive with Keith Moon. Yeah, other than that, there's no difference at all. Look, Keith Moon, entirely different.
Yes.
Kettle of fish.
Yeah.
You count Keith Moon off and you'd see him at the end, basically. I mean, he just hit things as hard as he could and as fast as he could until the end of the song. John Bonham was nothing like that. Keith Moon's kit, it wasn't tuned to be a particular sound. It was tuned so that the skin was really taut on all the tom-toms because the stick would react quicker off them. So it worked for him. Listen, he was quite extraordinary. You know what? My generation was the first time I'd ever played in something for a band to play to, like it would be the equivalent of a click.
Yeah.
And I completely disagree with clicks, particularly for rock, well, for anything, but particularly rock and roll. It has to breathe a bit, I think. Anyway, so Townsend had already done a synthesizer track, which had a rhythm to it. So they had to play to that. And the one person I would have thought who would never have been able to stay with a click track, the equivalent of a click track, was Keith Moon, because he was just a loony. Perfect.
Wow.
Every take, perfect. I swear.
Had he ever done that before? Or
No. Well, not that I'm aware of, anyway,
Okay.
no. I don't think anyone had done it before.
Okay, so this is one thing I could never understand about Keith Moon. How did his drum parts work so well with the songs? It makes no sense. I can't imagine anyone else playing those kind of parts. And how does it work so well?
I have no idea. I think it's a combination, to be fair, of Entwistle's genius on the bass.
Okay.
He didn't play bass like any other human being. And I think they affected each other subliminally in what the lunacy of what they were doing, with Townsend holding it down brilliantly with his rhythm playing. I've never worked with anybody like either any of the three of them. I mean, they were completely
but
different.
you know what I'm saying, that it wouldn't work with any other band what Keith Moon did.
No, absolutely. And when Keith eventually passed, and my dear friend Kenny Jones got the gig, Kenny being a fantastic rock and roll drummer, I'd worked with him for years, since he was 16 years old or whatever. Funnily enough, I wasn't asked to do whatever album that was. I can't remember what it was. So I wasn't there to protect him. And I'm sure he played really well, but Daughtry never got it. You know, Daughtry never. He was so used to the lunacy of Keith. And actually, to be fair, I don't think anyone's ever satisfied Daughtry since. Zach came pretty close. And the extraordinary thing about that is, I remember going to a party at Ringo's house. And we were all out in the garden, and I went inside to use the loo. And in this room was a drum kit set up at one end, with this 6-year-old Zach sitting at the drums, and Keith Moon giving him a lesson.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That's amazing.
And all those years later, Zach gets his gig. Extraordinary.
When you're first starting a session out with a band, is it you're going to set up, you have a certain way you like to set up? Would it be different with every band?
Absolutely. That, to me, that's one of the buzzes about the job, is there's no two situations are the same ever. You're dealing with a completely different bunch of people, or one person if it's a solo artist. Their requirements are invariably subtly different, and you have to read that as you go along and try and make sure that's facilitated. So there was never, invariably I'd been sent songs, and the songs that we were going to record would be decided upon before we got in the studio. I very rarely did pre-production with anybody. I didn't have the time apart from anything else. I would literally go from one project and the next day I'd start another one. But it worked out. We did what's called pre-production in the studio, which is actually can be very helpful because you can display your ideas by playing them back and discuss it as you go along. It's works pretty well.
What about stuff like tape editing? Was there a lot of tape editing that you would do as far as
yes,
sections of songs and things like that?
I mean, if one had been working on a track for a period of time and you'd finally got a really good take and there was an error in it that couldn't really easily be overdubbed or whatever else, I'd find it on the previous take or whatever and edit it in. But yes, it was quite normal process. Editing was huge. Same with mixes. I mean, I might edit a section of a mix that I got better than the previous take or whatever, you know.
And if you were editing a mix, you do it from the half-inch or whatever the mix down.
In those days,
would it be a quarter-inch?
Quarter-inch, yeah. In fact, nowadays it's quarter-inch too. I prefer quarter-inch, 15 IPS.
Let's say you do 3 passes of a mix or something like that, and you say, I like the second half of the second mix, first half of the first mix. You find the spots, cut the tape, get the other one, find the spot, cut the tape, put them together, listen to it.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't even listen to it. I'd have made the decision that was the best way to deal with it, and then move on.
Were you taking notes a lot of the times on things? You just kind of go by vibe, right? Oh, I remember that this was...
Well, you'd know when you were doing it if you cocked something up or you hadn't quite got it how you wanted it, you know. I never... I very rarely... I don't mark faders or... If a mix isn't going quite how I want it, I pull everything back and start again. Again, the way I record is not that complicated. So it's very straightforward, really.
Did you, depending on the studio, would you just work with whoever the assistant engineers were there that would help you out, and each studio would have different people, or would you have somebody that worked with you a lot?
Some. I mean, it would depend. There have been occasions where I would have an assistant that I'd take with me, but invariably I'd work with whoever was in the studio.
What were your favorite sounding consoles to work on?
The Helios would definitely come first, probably.
What do you like about the Helios?
I don't know, it just suited my sound. I was like having a good meal. I was very at home with them. Very simple, very extremely uncomplicated. I think the worst consoles in the world are SSLs. I think they're diabolical. I hate the sound of them. I think they're overly complicated, unnecessarily so. You need a bloody microscope to bloody figure out where any knob is or where it's set at. So the simpler the better. Trident console's very good, actually, funnily enough. And Neve is always a good, safe bet. And very often I have found that mixing something on a completely different brand of console to what you recorded on has huge benefits. Oh, and of course API, that's the... API is my, you know, if someone's got an API, I know I'm going to be rocking. Again, very simple, great sounding, clean, crisp, the business. Really clever design, uncomplicated.
Mm-hmm. What about things like miking guitar amps? Historically, how would you mic a guitar amp?
57 usually.
Close mic?
Not very, not as close as most people. One thing I was taught by, there was a period of time in the 90s when I came to the realization, probably too late, that my sound was dated, and I thought I should use an engineer when I was producing. And I started using a guy called Jack Puig, who I'm sure you're well aware of. And he showed me what he did with a miking guitar amp, and it was brilliant. You take a pair of earphones, you go out, you turn the mic up quite high on the console. You go out in the studio, you turn the amp up with nobody playing. If somebody played, they'd deafen you. And you move the microphone in front of the speaker, until you can hear the most hiss. And literally an inch either way makes, well, you know this, I'm sure,
Yeah.
you probably do it. I'd never thought, I just used to go, stick it in front. I got away with it. But that to me is now, if I'm miking it an electric guitar, that's what I would do. But I wouldn't put a mic any closer than that.
Well, it's funny because I worked with Jack one time and I asked him, and I knew that he had worked with you, and I asked him how you mic the drums. Right? I asked him how you mic the drums. Oh, and we walked out, we were Ocean Way, and he said that you'd put the mic above here and put the mic over the floor time. It's how funny is that he was the one that told me this. So I'm asking you, I'm just checking to make sure that he was right.
Yeah. But again, the drum miking thing, it depends on the kit, it depends on the player, and it depends on the volume he's playing, and it depends on the tune. There's a subtle difference about the distance. It can be a few inches either way, make quite a lot of difference. Don't forget, the one over the floor tom is looking at the snare drum.
Yeah.
So if they are in stereo, the snare drum's in the middle, you know.
Yeah.
And I never put them extreme stereo, I put them
You were talking about when you're
halfway.
panning them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the one above the kit, is that above the bass drum or is that above
No,
the
it's
snare?
looking at the snare drum. The
And the snare drum,
principle,
okay.
Yeah,
The snare
have to.
drum's in
The
the
snare
center.
drum's got to be in the middle. So they have to be equidistant, from the snare.
Yep.
Simple as that, really.
And then the room ambience would have some effect on it then.
Depending on the room and how you've screened the drums.
Would you use gobos or screens?
Oh, Christ, yeah. You'd have to, the way I've set up, because otherwise there'd be too much leakage into the drums.
I couldn't believe how big the rooms are at Abbey Road until I went there a couple years ago. Was Olympic a huge room?
Huge.
So same kind of thing.
Oh, yeah,
So you need
enormous.
gobos.
You could get a 50-piece, 60-piece orchestra in there easily.
Okay, so when you would set up, would you set up at one end of the room and then you...
No, I set up in the middle of the room, halfway down the room, facing me in the control room.
Okay.
And I'd use high screens behind everything.
And how big would that room be? Was it as big as Abbey Road 2 or something like that?
Yeah, probably a bit bigger. Wow. Yeah, it's a big room.
Studios had their own sound, not just the acoustics of the room, but the chambers that they would have. Like Abbey Road has a chamber behind Studio 2. Would you use chambers until they came out with plate reverbs and things like that? What?
The studio I started at, there was only chambers.
Okay.
The plate didn't exist in 1959 when I started. Yes, absolutely. Sunset Sound has a fantastic
Amazing
echo
chamber. Yeah.
Probably the best of the lot. Capitol Studios have a really good chamber. And actually no two EMTs are the same, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
So that when I booked a studio, I'd always book a particular EMT plate at Olympic, because there were 5, I think. And one of them was far better than the others.
When I was in the control room at Abbey Road in Studio 2, the chamber, which is at the other end of the room is 60 feet long. I mean, it's a massive room. All the microphone lines are incredibly long in these studios that are so big. Does that have any effect on the sound?
I mean, if you consider I recorded the Beatles on the roof at Abbey Road, and I ran cables down the stairwell. It was 5 stories down to the basement.
Okay.
Didn't seem to make any difference to anything. Sounded all right to me.
Okay, so when you did that, were you
And
just linking?
I used to do live recordings where we'd take equipment in those days, right back at the beginning.
Yeah.
The studio I started work at was IBC Studios, the best independent studio in Europe, and it had gear that you could move about. There was no such thing as a truck.
Right.
So you'd hire a furniture removal truck, shove it in, take it to the gig, and unload it. And invariably, you were miles from the bloody stage. So the huge long cable runs. It's work. I don't know.
When you guys were recording on the roof, were you actually just linking microphone cables together to get to extend them that far? How did you do that?
Yeah. That's how
You just
do it.
connect them together and just
Yeah.
like, oh, we need a few more.
And from a remote unit, you'd have long cables on drums anyway.
Yeah, and so you don't notice any difference with that.
Well, you know, invariably you're recording in a situation where you wouldn't notice any difference anyway, because it's the whole acoustic, everything's different. You know?
Right.
The acoustics are different, the circumstances are different.
When you saw the Get Back documentary, did your memories come back from it, or were you thinking, wow, we did that?
No, I remembered it fairly clearly. It was good fun. It was great. Thank God we did it. It gave us a good way of finishing the film. Well, the film didn't finish with it, but almost finished with it. Yeah.
It looked incredibly cold. Was it cold out?
It was January, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It was cold, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
John Lennon is wearing a fur coat.
Yeah. It was cold. Thank God it wasn't raining.
If you had to pick a couple records that you worked on that you really thought were special in your mind, what would you say?
I made an album with Pete Townsend and Ronnie Lane called Rough Mix, which is one of my favourite albums for all kinds of reasons. They were both very dear friends. I'd worked with them separately in the bands they were in. We got together to make the record because Ronnie had just left the Faces and was a bit low. And it turned out to be an incredible combination of two quite different people and quite different musicians, if the truth were known, that was just fabulous. Pete insisted on inviting Eric to come and play the guitar instrumental. Mm-hmm. And because I said, I don't want him anywhere near me, he's a bloody junkie, I think, no. And Pete said, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, it's one of those. So Eric came along and played, and he was great. He played really well. Eric came back to the studio every day just to hang out. He played dobro on something brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And at the end of the week, he asked me to work with him. And that's how I got to work with Eric. I'd have never gone near him otherwise.
Did you do Slow Hand? You did that record, right?
Yeah.
As Wonderful Tonight on it.
Yeah. So thank God Pete insisted, because I'd never have done that record otherwise. Oh. So that's another record I'm very proud of. Several of the Rolling Stones records I'm very proud of. I've worked with them for 13 years, so I did a lot with them. And that was really good education.
What's it like to work with Keith as a guitar player? He seems like he has such a unique style.
He has a very unique style. Working with Keith was not always the most stimulating, in as much as he would write in the studio, and so he would sit and play the same chord sequence over and over and over and over and over and over and over for several hours. In fact, sometimes several days, and that wasn't particularly exhilarating. However, in fact, it was inordinately boring. But the end result was always, you'd never know. Keith very rarely spoke to me. The only time he ever spoke to me was to criticise what I was doing, probably. Other than, he never said hello, never said goodbye. He didn't treat me any different to anyone else. It was the way he was. And I just accepted it. I had a great relationship with Mick, who I admire enormously, was really responsible for producing their records more than Andrew Oldham, more than Jimmy Miller. And Jimmy Miller was a different sort of producer, in as much as he provided an environment that is very important, which involves smoking enormous joints. I, on the other hand, am straight, never done any form of drug, and I'm quite happy about that. So he was lovely, Jimmy, and obviously a talented man. But Mick and Keith were really the producers of their records, as are so many artists. The people I've worked with, I said to you earlier on today, I've been really fortunate to be in the bloody room when some of the stuff I've done's gone on, and I've benefited from people giving me credit, partial credit or whatever. And okay, I got the sound, or I might, who knows, I don't remember what I did or what I contributed. I was there, but I didn't write the bloody song and I didn't perform it.
How loud did Pete Townsend play in the studio?
Pretty loud, nothing like as loud as he did on stage. Pretty loud though. Yeah.
And what difficulties were there recording loud amps? I mean, was that just common that people played loudly in the studio?
No difficulties at all, particularly in that room in Olympic. It's fine.
Would the guitar amps be out in the room as well and have screens around them?
As I say, my setup was as if on stage. So there was the amps would be in a line with the bass drum, basically, and then low screens, a high screen behind, and a low screen either side, just to separate them off.
And would you just try and get a take of the entire rhythm section? If there was a mistake or something, you punch it in, or do you not?
The entire rhythm section would be recorded at one go.
Yeah.
So everybody would be playing. There'd be no reason why that wouldn't happen, and a big reason why it should happen. Hello. overdubbing's a funny syndrome.
I was always curious about headphones back then, when the kind of headphones people used and how good people's headphone mixes were.
For me, incredibly important that the headphone mix is for whoever it is. The idea of giving a musician a choice of knobs so he could mix. Sorry, no, it's not a good idea. It can get a bit tricky, but invariably I would send what the mix of the monitor mix that I was listening to into the stereo, into the cans. And that invariably worked. Obviously, there were occasions where somebody couldn't quite hear themselves loud enough and I'd turn it up. But as I explained earlier on, to me, I try and feed them the way I perceived the sound of the thing at the end of the day as best I could. And it seemed to work really well.
People working in the control room, was that something that was not common at all when you first started? When would that become a thing that somebody would do overdubs and stand in the control room?
In my situation, extremely rarely. Extremely rarely. I didn't encourage it particularly. I've done it when it suited, but it wouldn't be something I don't really like having the artist in the same room as me. No, joking. Get out in your own bloody spot. No, not a common thing with me at all.
If I were to say, okay, you can go work at one studio, of all the studios you've worked at, what would be your favorite studio to work in?
Oh, that's a really difficult question. Okay, in America, Sunset Sound.
Okay.
In the UK now, British Grove, Martin Knopfler's studio. Fabulous studio. Got the best mic collection, huge array of tape machines. I still record on tape. I don't use Pro Tools. I still record 16 track if I can.
Okay.
15 IPS.
Why 15 IPS? Better
Because
better
it's
bass?
better than 30. It just sounds better than
Okay.
30. And I would probably use Dolby's with that, but not if they weren't there. I wouldn't use them. Yeah. To me, it's the saddest thing to me. I understand that everything changes and things move on and whatever. But the saddest thing to me is that the quality of recorded sound has depreciated substantially in the last many years. That's 20 years, maybe more. And so the norm now has become something that I can barely listen to. Mm-hmm. It's become not important anymore. Not only in the manner it's recorded, but in the manner it's listened to. I mean, just the whole system has been downgraded and reduced to sort of awfulness. I guess it doesn't. I mean, just there's so many aspects of what's gone on now that I'm sad about. The other one is albums. People don't listen to albums anymore.
Right.
They listen to individual tracks, which is great. It's fine. But back in the day, an album was a statement. It was an entire statement of where that person was at. Mm-hmm. Even if they weren't writing the material, but particularly if they were writing the material, it was a statement of where their writing was at and where they were perceiving what they wanted to do. And it wasn't just one song, it was a group of material, and the running order became incredibly important as to how it was perceived. And then back in the day, people would buy an album and they'd go home and they'd sit down in the middle of their speakers and they'd listen to the whole thing and get a huge buzz out of it. It's like watching a movie. I don't think that happens now. Or if it does, I'd love to know about it.
When you would deliver a finished record to go to the mastering stage, is that where the record would get assembled?
No, I would assemble the record in the studio on finishing it, play it back to the artist, we'd agree on the running order and play it back. Done. And then I would take that tape to the mastering facility and supervise the mastering.
Okay, and you would always go to the mastering?
Yes.
Was there ever a time where you would say, I don't like the mastering, we want to do it again? Did things like that happen back then?
No, because I was there, I was present.
Okay.
And I used to use one guy, a gentleman called Doug Sachs at the mastering lab, he and I became very close friends, and I would fly 6,000 miles to use him, you know.
Wow.
And it paid off. 'Cause I knew exactly what I was going to get. I knew I knew his gear would represent what was on my tape really well without him doing anything. His gear would transcribe my tape onto a disc accurately, and his skill. I didn't want to rebuild the bloody bridge. You know, I didn't want anything changed. I'd done it all. I got it how I wanted it, and that's how I wanted it on the record.
Would you print the mixes really hot on the tape, or how would you
print them at the maximum level you could? Yeah,
Okay.
Not without distortion, obviously, because obviously the hotter you go within reason, the less tape is you get.
If I were to say to you, give me 3 pieces of gear that you couldn't do without, studio gear.
Studer 16 track, Neumann U67, and there's a limiter which I do own one of. It's a Pi limiter.
Yes.
Which they have one built into the console at Olympic, which is brilliant for vocals. You can't really hear it, but it does the job really well. So a Pi limiter then. Okay.
Is your Pi limiter, do you have it actually mounted? Do you have a rack version of it or something?
I do, yes. I've had it in my console. Yeah.
Why is it that those are so hard to reproduce?
I don't know. I've never really got the difference between compression and limiting. I've never really thought about it that much, but I mean, there's loads of other bits of gear that I love. Pultec, maybe.
Okay.
Would be Pultec's fabulous. Anything tube.
Okay, and besides the U67, what are 3 other microphones that you can't do without?
SM7.
Okay, what do you like that for? For vocals?
It's very good for some vocals, not
Yes.
all, but particularly if the vocalist is live in the room. It's very directional.
Yes, yeah.
But it's a really good mic.
If you don't have a D30 for the bass drum, what would you use?
I'd use a D12 or a D20. I mean, you know, any D.
Any D?
Any D.
Any AKG D?
Yeah. Oh, and a 57 would be, again, incredibly versatile for most things. And a 414 is another mic I really like.
Okay, you didn't say
mic.
U47. Do you not like 47s?
Oh, yeah, I own 3. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, great mic, yeah. I mean, I like them all, you know, the mics that I use. I mean, there isn't one that's, you know.
What do you like about the 67?
Again, it's incredibly versatile and accurate. I don't know if you've ever found this. I'd be interested to know. I've never talked about it to anybody else. There are a few vocalists that I've worked with, women in particular, funnily enough, who have sung a song in my ear, and you immediately realise that there isn't a microphone on the planet that can reproduce that sound. Linda Ronstadt being one, Emmylou Harris being another one. Mm-hmm. Just the most extraordinary sound comes out of their gob. And listen to a record, it still sounds pretty good, but it's not. It's anything close to what you're getting if they sing in your ear. So that, obviously microphones have limitations, clearly. It's a technical device. Because a vocal mic works well with, in general, which most of them do, one, if you've got the time and you can take the trouble, even from one song to another, a different microphone might suit the key or the pitch or the whatever it is, or the tonal quality of the delivery of the individual. I'm sure that, well, most of my life I've never given that any thought. I just bang my mic up and let them get on with it. But it's interesting. If you do experiment, you do find it from one song to another. It can be different.
Who's a singer that got their takes really fast?
Well, let's start from Steve Marriott was really quick with the Small Faces. Pete Townsend's very quick. Daltrey's very quick. Mick Jagger's very quick. Nearly all of them. I don't think Joan Armatrading. We haven't talked about Joan. The records I made with her are I'm as proud of them as I am anything I've ever done.
Why can't I feel love?
Amazing, yeah.
And we're still really close friends. She lives not terribly far away, and we see each other all the time. It's great. She's completely brilliant. I learned so much from working with her. Sat there, you know, unbelievable. Completely original writer, completely original guitar player, and singer. I mean, just completely new package. Took me down a new road altogether musically, and it was difficult to keep up with because I was putting all the rhythm sections together, and she didn't really want to work with the same people every album. So I was running out. By the time she stopped working with me, I was running out of people to work with.
Zeppelin, that record, once again, you had recorded the same way, everybody playing together.
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah. I think, as I mentioned, there was an acoustic overdub, but there was the old overdub. But and the vocals may have been redone. I don't really remember, to be honest.
Okay.
But it's entirely possible that he would have sung with the track and then we'd have concentrated on the vocal afterwards, but I don't really remember.
The second track on the record's Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. That starts with the acoustic picking part. And what would be a mic to use?
That would have been a
mic to use?
67 with a bass cut in.
Okay.
And he would have been in the booth next to the control room looking out at the band because he had to play on the basic track.
And how close would you be with a microphone?
Yeah, far.
Where would you
80 inches maybe.
Where would you typically place it?
Again, it would depend on the guitar. So I don't remember on that occasion, but not necessarily over the hole. It could be slightly closer to the bridge. It could be slightly closer to the neck of the guitar. I put my ear down and see,
where it sounds
depending on the
best.
instrument. Yeah.
And then would you put anything, any compression or anything on it when you tracked it?
I think on that particular track would be one of the very rare occasions where I might have even double limited it, which was me breaking all the rules. But
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an engineer in America called Bill Howson that I'm sure you're aware of. And he had he had given me this, he said, you should try it. You know, he'd done it on something. And I poo-pooed it and I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And it seemed to work. I mean, you could tell it's limited to fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a live take, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Jimmy would be in ISO booth
Yeah.
playing. Would Robert be singing? That might even be the vocal.
Might be, I can't remember.
No click track, nothing like that, right?
No.
Everybody looking at each other.
Yeah.
Did you ever use click tracks other than when you just talked about Keith?
No. Against my religion.
And just talk about that a little bit more. What do you think? What do you think about that?
Hold on. Well, again, this is entirely different from nowadays. Everything has to be controlled.
Doesn't have to be.
Well, it would appear that most of what one listens to me, my job was about capturing a performance of a group of people and their subliminal interaction with each other. You could do 6 takes and they'd all be different. And eventually you'd get to the take where it all literally comes together. And it's like a bloody firework going off. It's just, the difference is extraordinary. And that came about through people subliminally interacting. They're not even aware of it. They're probably concentrating like fuck on what they're doing. But however, they're being tremendously influenced by what everyone else is doing. Equally, everyone else is being influenced by what they're doing. And if you overdub something, you're influenced by what precedes you, what you're being played to, but you're clearly not influencing what happened before. Now, invariably, if it's one instrument on a track, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference to the feel. However, my principle has always been, everybody should play it once, and that way you'll get a performance of a piece of music rather than some sterile, perfect nonsense. Music is about emotion, for God's sake, and emotion is expressed by a group of people playing together. If you were going to record a string quartet, you wouldn't record one instrument at a time. For all I know, they might do that now. I don't know, but
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. But I mean, that's my principle.
Yeah.
And so for the music that I love and that I appreciate, that's the way it should be recorded.
There are so many songs that you worked on. I have a whole list of them on this that I made a playlist of. It almost seems like they've existed forever. But at one point, that song was recorded. You were there. You put the mics up. You started the tape machine. The guys played the parts, and then they came back in and listened, right? And they listened. They're like, "Sounds good." I mean, right? Everybody, yeah, that sounds good. I mean, there was a point when that happened, right? With all these songs.
Yeah, of course.
And then you're like,
And
okay,
if it didn't sound good, you go and do it again.
go do it again. And then it's like, okay, let's move on. Is that typically what would happen?
Yeah.
Even these songs that are just that people think have existed forever, the most famous songs of all time, so many of these songs. And at some point, they play through it, you get the takes, and you're like, okay, that's good. Let's move on to something else.
Yeah,
And you don't think about it.
Time is money, mate.
I mean, really, that's what it's like.
Yeah.
That's amazing. After the Get Back documentary that I guess you said it happened in such a short period of time. When I watch it, it's 9 hours of footage, but it was actually a very short period of time making that.
Absolutely. I think a particularly short period of time in my life. I mean, I'd been working the night before on something else, and when I finished that, I was working on something else. I mean, and it was a few days, and I was knocking out albums with people almost as famous as the Beatles all the time. So it was a really interesting experience. And I'm glad I was there. And that's it, really. It wasn't that special. I mean, it was special because they were who they were, I suppose. But it wasn't that satisfying from a production point of view because I wasn't really the producer, although I was credited eventually with, I don't know. And then Phil Spector got hold of it via John Lennon and crucified it. I mean, turned it into the biggest load of puke you've ever heard in your life. So I got over it really quickly. My version never got released, as you know, until recently. I didn't care. I was busy.
In your book, you say that had your mom not told you to call back the studio...
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I'd be digging a ditch somewhere. Definitely, yeah.
Were you thinking about it? And your mom's like, you should just call him back.
I think she came to me and said, "Have you called him?" And I said,
well, for people that hadn't read the book, I mean, it's right in the beginning where you talk about this. Just tell the story.
Okay. My sister is older than me, and she worked for a guy in London as a secretary, and he had a girlfriend who was a middle-aged lady, I think. And they were in polite conversation while she was waiting for her boyfriend to finish work in the outer office. Tell me about your family. Got to me, got a brother, he's 17, just left school. Oh, what are his interests? His interests in music. We don't know what's going to become of him. He's academically useless, which I was. We're really concerned about his well-being. And the woman said, well, do you think he'd like to work in a recording studio? Well, my sister came home. Now, up until that moment, I'd taught myself to play. I bought a guitar when I was 15. I worked on a farm, earned the money, bought a guitar, taught myself to play it, started writing songs with my neighbour, who was much older than me. He wrote the lyrics, I wrote the music. It was just fun. Then I had a band that I managed, who were local pals, and sang with sometimes. A semi-pro band, just having a nice time. Mm-hmm. So that was it for me. I mean, I never thought of becoming professional in the music business on any level at all. So all of a sudden, would you like to work in a recording studio? I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I knew nothing about recording. So anyway, this woman got me an interview, and I went along, and the guy who managed the studio, his name was Alan Stagg. He was Welsh, and I'm Welsh, so there was a connection there. And he was very polite, and he asked me a load of questions, most of it which I couldn't answer. And he said, well, we'll let you know if there's anything becomes available. So I go home, and my mother said, how'd you get on? And so weeks later, 5 or 6 weeks later, my mother comes to me and said, have you rung that man? He hasn't contacted you. I said, well, no, he said he'd ring me. It'd be impolite for me to call. he said he'd call me when there was a position available. I can't. I said, you go and ring him now. And you didn't argue with my mum. So I went and rang. It's just the quirk of fate. It's just how God looks down on you, I guess. I rang and he answered the phone. He said, oh, yes, I remember you. He said, yes. He said, well, it just so happens that someone's handed in their notice today. When can you start? I said, tomorrow. And he went, okay.
And that was
That was it. I got on the train, went up to London and started work. And the studio happened to be the best studio in Europe. I mean, it was fantastic. Independent studio. Everybody and their mother worked there. So it was a great variety of stuff, orchestral stuff, Julian Bream on acoustic guitar. I mean, everything and anything. Jingles. Great education, basically.
amazing.
And I sat there with my gob shut, watching what was going on, learning the ropes, basically. And there was a young guy who'd left school illegally at 15, and got a job as a 16-year-old as an engineer. We're talking about 1959, who was a genius engineer. And he was younger than me, and I got to work as his assistant. So anything that was more modern that came through the door of the studio, we got, because we were the kids and we understood it more. And one thing led to another, and here I am. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. And eventually I think I was the first engineer to turn freelance, which was about 4 years later, I guess, 21.
Wow, that's a long, wow, so you worked there a long time.
Yeah, that only worked because IBC lost, I turned professional as a singer, ha ha, made a couple of records, turned professional as a singer, they died of death, of course. And I had a client called Shel Talmy, who was an American producer, produced the Kinks and the Who, and I'd done all those records with him. And he called me up and he said, how are you doing? I said, well, I'm sitting here looking at the wall. And, it's not, my career hasn't taken off here. He said, well, would you come back and work as a freelancer? I said, well, I don't think they'd let me. So I called IBC and I spoke to the guy who owned it and said, how's things? He said, well, it's gone a bit quiet since you left. I said, well, I could come back, but you have to pay me by the hour. So I got paid by both ends. So I got away with that for 12 months, and then the staff there all got pissed off because they were never working. I was always using the studio. So they kicked me out, and I went to Pi Studios, which was a great studio, actually. And they were very happy to bring my clients, and it sort of went on from there. Then Olympic opened, and once Olympic opened, I was off. Asked to do an album with Steve Miller. First album, he just signed to Capitol. Mm-hmm. The band came to London. They'd booked 3 weeks or something at Olympic, I can't remember. And he was producing himself. And after 2 weeks, we got nothing. It was just boring as buggery. Mm-hmm. So I said to him, okay, I'm sorry, but I'm out of here. I can't, I'm really bored and there's nothing going on here. So I've got better things to do. So he said, well, what can I do to make you stay? I said, well, let me produce. So he agreed. And so I produced the first Steve Miller album as a result, which we did then in 2 weeks. When they get high, they can see 4 miles and that was it. That album took off. And after all these years of working with the Stones, and then completely, quite rightly, only ever thinking of me as an engineer, my production career sort of took off. And I went to America, and one thing led to another. I was accepted as a producer. Again, which in those days was unheard of. Engineers did not become producers. I think it's more normal now, quite rightly. Yeah. Did you start as an engineer, or did you?
I started as a producer.
As a producer, and then you took
producer and engineer at the same time.
Right. So you cut your teeth as an engineer while producing somebody.
Yeah, basically, yes.
That's disgusting. God, putting someone's career at risk while you learnt how to engineer.
Yeah. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your brother Andy. Andy was 8 years younger than you?
Yes.
Passed away, I guess, 2013.
Yes.
Did Andy become a producer just separately from you? How did that?
An engineer. He started as an engineer. Look, it was 8 years difference, quite a lot when you were young.
Yes,
It was a
absolutely.
massive difference. So by the time he left school, I was well ensconced in what I was doing, and he liked the idea of doing the same. I got him a job at Olympic as a trainee assistant, which I can't remember how long it was. He was there a few months, I guess, during which time he assisted on Hendrix sessions and became very friendly with Hendrix. And then I think he got the sack because his timekeeping wasn't very good. And he got a job at another studio, Morgan Studios in London. And it transpired that he was a brilliant engineer. I mean, really, really good recording engineer. So nothing to do with me at all. Entirely his skill.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, he made some phenomenal records, I think. And fairly quickly moved to America. Well, in fact, when I stopped working with the Stones, I got him the gig. I recommended him to work with the Stones.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah. Well, it was an easy recommendation.
Yeah.
He was already
you should
making
work with
great.
my brother.
He was making great records, so they got it, And I think he got on very well with the guys. Unfortunately, he had a bit of a problem with drugs, which didn't do him any favors, and eventually moved to America. And as the rest, he made some phenomenal, mostly heavy rock records.
Yeah.
Really, really wonderful. We stayed in touch vaguely, but because of his drug habit and then eventually alcohol habit, I tended to keep my distance a bit because we didn't really have a lot in common other than what we did. But I had a huge respect for him. Yes, it's very sad. His demise was not very nice at all. And I'm sure those that got to work with him benefited from his brilliance enormously. And everybody I've come across who work with him always speak very highly of him, which is quite right, so they should.
Yeah, I've heard so many wonderful things about him.
Yeah. Great sense of humour, incredibly well read, bright as a button, basically. Yeah, good guy underneath all the nonsense. He was a really lovely guy.
Well, Glyn, I really appreciate you making the time.
Oh, mate, it's lovely that you came by. It's great. It's really cool.
You have such a nice place here, man. It's incredible.
Good.
Thank you so much for inviting me out.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you for mentioning the book. I mean, let's see.
Yes, get the book, Sound Man.
Have you ever read it?
I have read it, yes. I have read it. I read it when it came out.
People have been trying to get me to add an addendum because...
Add an addendum
because
to it.
It was a while ago I finished it.
Well, this is a perfect time to add to put the addendum on it. Definitely check out Glyn's book, Sound Man.
There you go. Good stuff. Yeah.
Really
great.
appreciate
It's great
it.
you came. I'm really glad you came. It's
and
lovely.
I'm
nice
such a
to meet you guys.
fan, and you have a wonderful place here.
Yeah, it's lovely. I'm a lucky man.
You're a lucky man.
On many levels.
Yes.
I can tell you.